Hi guys, welcome back. And in today's challenge, we're going to create a testimonial carousel using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So this is the carousel as you can see it. And then if I click next, so this button should go next. If I click that, you can see we load a new testimonial. We click again, we load a new testimonial. We click again, and then these testimonials are looping. So they are looping from the last to the, so if I go back, you can see this one is brand 2. This is the last one. This one is the first one. So if I go, I'll find brand 2, and then I go back to the testimony, the first testimonial. So this is what we are going to create. And let's get started. So in our HTML, you can see we already have a link to the CSS. This is the CSS file. And we also have a link to the JavaScript file. This is the JavaScript file. It has testimonial data, because I'm assuming like if you want to show the testimonials in the HTML and update it, I wanted to take this approach whereby we use some testimonial data. Maybe this data you're getting from an API. This is what we are going to simulate, whereby the testimonials is an array of objects and they have key value pairs. So like the ID, the other images, other name, other title is active. So this is active is what will control in JavaScript which testimonial is currently active. The next one is the testimonial content. And then you might ask, where are these assets? So these assets are located inside the images. So you can see the images. They are not in full size, but you can see them. And then you also have the icons. I have two icons. The angle icon. So what I did with the angle left is that I rotated this 360, I think 180 degrees here. Then you have the star for the rating. All right, so you might be asking, where can I get these assets? So if you go to my GitHub repository, so if you check on the URL, it's the github.com/techwithtwin and then TikTok-projects. And then the project you are going to look for is the reviews carousel. And the reviews carousel, you can see the finished version is here. So you have the icons. These are the icons and these are the images. So you can go ahead and click maybe the images, and these are all the images, and you can download them and continue following along with this tutorial. So let's get started. So the first thing you can see now is that let's first create an empty div, whereby this one will hold the heading and the testimonial card. All right. So I'm going to create a heading level 2 and call it testimonials. All right. And then let's first go live. I showed you how to go live using the live server extension. So we already have the testimonials, and also in the styles, we are loading the Google fonts, specifically the font family of Poppins. I did a tutorial on how to load the fonts, and then we are setting the initial CSS styles, margin 0, padding 0, and the box sizing border box. I said about the box sizing, whenever you have the box sizing as border box, it means that the width and whenever you're working with the width is inclusive of the paddings and the margins. So for instance, if I have a card that is 200 pixels, if I say the width is 200 pixels and I give it a padding of 10, then the content will be squeezed inside that 200 pixels. If you don't have the box sizing border box, and then you have a card that is 200 pixels and a padding of 10 pixels on all sides, then the width will be plus 10 from the left and the plus 10 from the right. So that will be maybe 220 pixels, which is not what normally you want. The next thing is the body. You can see the body has a padding. And then you have a background color. The background color you can see. And then we have a font family of Poppins. So let's go back to our HTML. So we have the testimonials title. Then I'm going to create another div and call it slot. So the way I'm thinking about this is that we will be having a slot, and the slot is what will have the card. So the slot will have the card that will be removed dynamically by JavaScript. Okay, so we have that slot, and then inside the slot is where we fix the data. But for now, I'm just going to create one single card, and then later on we are going to remove it and place it into the JavaScript. So I'm going to create a div with a class of card, and then I'll create a paragraph tag inside the card, let me give p.testimony. So this is the actual testimonial. So if I go to the finished version, let me copy one of the testimonials. So I'm going to copy this, Command C and Command V. So this is the actual testimonial. So if you go back to this, you can see the testimonial as shown. And then after the testimonial, what else do we need? We need a horizontal line. So we are going to create a horizontal line here. You just write HR for the horizontal line. Then you can see it shows here. The next thing we need is this now. This one you can see we have two elements, this profile and the rating. Inside the profile, you have two elements as well. We have the image and the profile details. So let's create this and give it, let's call this div the bottom section. So we can say bottom section. This is the bottom section which holds everything. And then inside here we have two divs. The first one is the profile div. The profile holds the image. So I'm just going to use the image tag. And then I can close off that. And then the source, I'm going to use my GitHub's avatar. So to get your GitHub's avatar, you just write your username, github.com/username, then add .png at the end or .jpg. And then because we are just testing out, let me just use this. You can use yours or you can use maybe an image from the internet. And then here we are going to add a width of 50. So this width tells the browser how much of the space we let reserve and how much of the image we let request. And then the height is equals to just 50. You save that and then you can see the image, the size of the image that has been requested. So if you did not write this, you'd be dealing with a very huge image. Let me show you. Okay, so this one is not working as expected. So we save that and then remove these two. Then you can see the size of the image you're working with. So that's why we use that. So the next thing we need is that we have two elements here. The first element we have is this section and then the next section. So you're going to start with this section whereby you have already written you have given it a class of profile, and then outside that, the next element is the user data. So I'll just call it user data. The user data now has, let's use a heading level 4, and then let's just use TWT, and then you have a paragraph that gives the title. So let's say software dev. All right. So as I said, we have, think of these cards or think of the layouts as boxes. So we have the bottom box. This is the bottom box. And then inside that bottom box, we have two boxes, the left box and the right box. Inside this left box, we have two other boxes. The first one holds the image. The next one holds the user data. So it's just a matter of placing these items side by side. And then we are going to fix the layout later on, but for now, let's continue. And then let's add the ratings. So we have the profile. This bottom section has two. So the next one is the rating. So just call it rating. The rating will now have this rating icon. So where is that icon? The icon is located here as a star. All right. So the reason I did not load this from the Google Fonts is because I don't want to load a whole library just to get two icons. So that is not feasible in my end. So that's why I just downloaded these SVGs so that I don't download a whole bunch of a library just for the icons. All right. So here we are going to use an image tag to display the icon, and then the source will be, now we use that, it is icons, and then we want the star icon. And then for the width, we'll give it a width of 15 and a height of 15. And then finally, let's give it an alt, which will just say star. And then let's close that off. And then if we go back to our version, you can see one star here. And then you have to copy this down like 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we just copy these 5 times. And then you have 5 stars that shows up. So that's all for the starter. We'll add the rest of the icons, or maybe we can add them and then we'll continue. So the next thing we need to add now is the navigation buttons. So let's get out of the slot. We have collapsed the slot. And then, so you can see we have a heading, the slot which has the card. We have already written the data for the card. This is the card. And then inside the card, we have the testimony paragraph. This is just the testimony. And then you have a horizontal row, this one. And then we have the bottom section. The bottom section is this whole section, which has 2 elements, the left one and the right one. So if you come here, you can see the left one has a class of profile. So the left one has a class of profile and the right one has a class of rating, and inside it has the ratings stars. And then for the profile, we have 2 elements inside the profile, the image and the user data. Okay. So let's collapse the slot and then let's create these navigation icons. These ones are outside the card. These ones are not going to change. All right. So here we are going to create a div with the class of navigation BTNs. So this one will hold these 2 buttons. And then let's start with the left button. Because I want to use an image to display, these angles. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to wrap this inside a div as well. And then I'll call it left angle. All right. And then I'll create an image similar to what we did. And the source will be icons slash. Then we click on the angle. We are going to give it a width of 15 and a height of 15. So width 15 and the height of 15. You save that and then you can give it an alert of angle, just like that. Not focusing too much on the stars. So if you go back to the document, you can see the angle here on the bottom. So next up is that we are going to create the next one. So I can just copy paste this one. So copy it down and then this one will be the right angle. And then it will still have that same icon and then the same height and width, but we will rotate it. You can see now this one has been created here. So let's first continue with the CSS. Something else you might note is that these 2 icons will share most of the styles. So we can give them a common class like angle base. And then this one as well, you can give it a common class, angle base. Let's go back to the CSS and then we are going to start with the card itself. The card, you can see this card has a background color of white. So we are going to start with that card and then see from there. So we come here and then select the card and say background color of white. If you go back to this, you can see it is background color white, but now it's very big. We need to limit its width. So we can say width 300 pixels. Right, we were able to limit this, and then you can see the content is too much to the edges. Then we can add a padding of 1 rem. Right, you can see now it looks a bit nice. The next thing you might notice is that the edges are too sharp. So that's why we need a border radius of 5 pixels. It'll look nice now. The next thing you realize is this text is too huge. So we need to resize that. And then that text is of class testimony. So we can grab it using the testimony class. So we can say dot testimony. And then we reduce the font size to something like 0.8 rem. So the best thing about using the rem is that it is relative. So when you zoom, it will know how to change. It is not fixed. It will change depending on the zoom levels. It is relative to the document. So the next thing we need to do is text align. We want this to be in the center. We don't want it to be in the edge. So you can see it has aligned to the center. Then let's continue to this bottom section. This bottom section has two elements, the left and the right. So we need to display this flex, not on top of each other. So to do that, we are going to grab the dot bottom section, and then inside the bottom section we display flex. And then the reason I've used, you can see now it has displayed flex. So the reason I've used that is because we have a class of bottom section that holds two elements, the profile and the rating. All right. Yes. So the next thing is to align the items to the center. So we say align item center. This is all flex box. And then after that, we can justify them, space between. You could not see it too much of a difference because, or let's go to our, you can see now it is aligned to the center. And then the next thing we need to fix is this left hand side, which is of a class of profile. So we can say this inside the profile, you can say dot profile. You can say display flex. You can see now they have been displayed side by side. And then we can give it some gap of maybe 4 pixels. They are too close to each other. You can see that. All right. And then we can align these items to the center. Then you can see now the text and the image are aligned to the center. The next thing you need to work on is the image. You can see the finished version, the image is rounded. So how to get to that is that the dot profile and grab the image. So how did we do that? The profile, we have the profile class. Inside we have the image. So we grab the image and border radius of 100%. You can see it is now circular. The next thing is that this text and this is too huge. So let's first reduce this text. So it is the heading level 4. And then we can grab it from the user data, then the heading level 4. So you can say dot user data. And then we grab the H4, and then we can say font size 0.8 rem. It's a bit small now. Then let's reduce this text. So it is user data, and then we grab the P. So we can do user data and then P, and then we can say font size of 0.7 rem. So you use the dot user data to grab the class. Okay, now it looks a bit nice. We are getting somewhere. The next thing you can see now, this card is too much close to the edges. So we can go to the body and display it flex. We can do that, or we can grab the slot. Let's do this. But there are too many ways to do this. So we can display this flex and then justify content to the center. Then you can see now everything is in the center. All right. The next thing we need to grab is this heading so that we can place it in the center. So how to grab this? We only have one heading level 2. So we can just grab it by its tag. So we can say H2. Then we can say text align to the center. So text align to the center. I think it looks nice like that now. So we have this. All right. And then we need to fix the margin. This one is too close to the card. So we can say margin bottom. We don't have a margin bottom. So we need to use the margin. Oh, we have a margin bottom. We can say 5 pixels. All right. And then you can see they have some breathing room. The next thing is that inside the card, we have, inside this card now, we have, this is too close to the horizontal rule. It is too close to the bottom section. So we can go to the card. Inside the card, let's display this flex. So we can say display flex, then flex direction of column. All right. And then gap of 6 pixels. All right. You can see now we got some gaps. All right. And then that looks nice. So I think that is okay for the card. The next thing you need to work on is these bottom navigations. Then after that, we can continue. So these navigation buttons, they also need to be displayed flex because they are two, 1 and 2. So 1 and 2. So let's display them flex. We grab them by their class. So we can say dot navigation btns and then display this flex. Then justify content center. You can see now these two. So you can see now these two are in the center. All right. And then we can say a gap of 10 pixels between them is okay. You can see now they have given each other the breathing room. And then finally, what we can do now is we can align them in the center so that they can be in the same line. And then the next thing is to add a margin top. You can see it is too close to the card, and then you can say 0.5 rem. You can see now they are not too close to that. So the next thing I need to target is that we gave this the same class. So you can see angle class and angle base. No, angle base and angle base. So we can style these two the same way. So we can say dot angle base. And then now what we are going to do here is let's add some paddings. No, let's start with the border. Before we style the angle base, let's style the individuals. So we have the left angle and the right angle. So what I'm going to do now is to start with those. So dot right angle, we can give it a background color of black. All right, you can see it there. And then the left angle, so the left angle has a background color of blue. So something you might notice is they are all facing the same direction. So we need to change the left angle to point the other way. So what we can do is to transform it and say transform and then rotate and then negative 180 degrees. I think even positive 180 will work. Let's see. Okay, it works. Let's do the negative one. I think it's still the same. So we have rotated the left angle 180 degrees so that it looks like what we expect. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to style the angle base. So we say the angle base is supplied to both of these because this is the same styles. They are the same things. Let's first give them a padding of 0.2 rem. Right, you can see now they have started to increase the size. The next thing is to add a border radius of 100%. So you can say border radius of 100%. Then you can see now they are a bit circular. Let's give them a width and a height of the same so that it can be circular. So width of 20 pixels and height of 20 pixels. All right, you can see that. And then you can see now they are not in the middle. They are not aligned. So let's use Flexbox to fix this. We can say display flex and then justify content to the center, align items to the center. You can see now the icons look a bit better. So the next thing is that whenever I hover on these icons, I want them to change the opacity. So what I can do is to capture the angle base, then grab the hover state, and then we can say opacity 0.6. Then now if I hover over this, you can see now they are changing the opacity. So, and then the next thing is that this is an image. We can capture this image. So we can say dot angle base, and then we capture this image and give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. So I'm going to say dot angle base and then capture the image. The image happens to be these icons. And then we can give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. Not much has changed. And then we can say now object fit, then contain, right? So that they can in the middle. Let's increase their padding. You can say something like 0.4. 0.4 is too much. 0.3. I think 0.3 looks a bit nice. So we are done with the HTML. So HTML and CSS, I can see it's around 25 minutes. Let's work on the JavaScript. So we are done with the HTML. Let's not focus on the HTML now. Let's focus on the JavaScript bit. So in the JavaScript, I said we have the testimonials. So these testimonials is the testimonial data, which we will loop through using JavaScript to get us to display the data. So what I'm going to do first is to get these two icons, to capture these two icons from the DOM. So what I'm going to do is to create two variables. So const left angle is equals to document dot query selector, and then the class is dot left angle. So we can confirm that real quick. So the class is left angle and right angle. So we just need to capture these two. So I'm just going to copy this down. And then now this one is the right angle, and then we can change this to right. So we captured all these two. The next thing is to add two event listeners. So how that will listen to the events from these two buttons. So we can say left angle dot add event listener, and the event we want is the click. So whenever anyone clicks on this, we want to get alerted. Before I add the handler function, I'm going to create it below here. And the reason I'm creating it below is that because JavaScript will still hoist this function on top of the file before executing any of the code. So I'll just saying handle click. In other languages, this would not be possible. But in JavaScript, this is possible. So because I'm going to add two event listeners that will be handled by the same function, I need to identify who am I dealing with. Is it the left angle click or is it the right angle click? So, and then the handler here is handle click. So whenever we listen a click from the left angle, we call this handle click function, but you remember we are passing a type and you cannot call this function because this is the work of JavaScript. So what we are going to do, we are going to wrap this one inside an anonymous function so that we are not calling it, but we can be able to pass something or some data. So we are going to pass left. So that the reason we are doing this is because we need the type in the handle click. Otherwise, we could be forced to create two functions to handle those two events. But now, when we wrap this into an anonymous function, this anonymous function is not getting called. So if this anonymous function is not getting called, whenever it will be called, it will return the handle click and then pass the left type. All right, I think that's well noted. So the next thing is to copy this down. And then let's call this right angle dot add event listener. And then we need to differentiate who are we dealing with, because in this function, we don't know which event we are going to deal with. And we don't want to keep passing around the event. We could pass the event and then say event.target. We could do that, but it's easier to just do it the simpler way. There's a way we could do that and get from the event, we can say event.target, and then we can check all that. But now let's use this. It still works. We don't want to start messing around with the event object. So this is the handle click. Let's first alert here and say hello. Let's see. So we click the right arrow. You can see hello. You can click the left. You can see the hello. All right. So something I want to do is, now I have the HTML and I have a div called slot. So this div called slot holds the card. What I want to do in my JavaScript, I want to be swapping this card with new data. This is the scenario I want to, or this is the way I want to do it. I want to swap this using JavaScript. So whenever, let me show you the finished version. Whenever we click, we are swapping the card. You can see the highlighted card. This is what we are going to swap This is what we are going to swap using JavaScript. So you can see it is swapping the contents inside the card and then the content in the slot div. So we are going to swap this with the new data as we continue. New data, new data, new data, new data, new data, like that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove this from here. We don't need this card, but I have copied it in the clipboard. So we don't need that card in the HTML. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create yet another function. And this function, let me show you what this function will do. This function's job is to populate card data. Because we need to populate this data using JavaScript, we create a reusable function that will help us so that we don't keep repeating the HTML. Let me show you. So what we will require from this is the content. This one will go to match with the testimonial data type. You can see we have other image, other name, other title is active, and the testimonial. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to accept the content. Let me do it like this. Like that. I'm going to accept the content. I'm going to accept the other image. I'm going to accept the other name. And then I'm going to accept the other title. All right. And then when I accept this in my function, I'm going to return the card we have just copied. So what I'm going to do here is return and then use the templating string. Right? We use the templating string. Let me show you. And then we are going to return the card. But now this function, I know this one is not well. Let me make this big. Let's do it like that. So this function's job is going to populate the card with dynamic data. So instead of this content here, we remove this content. We remove this content here. And after removing this content, we dynamically add the content. You can see we are returning the new string. This is the new string, right? And then now for the avatar, for the images avatar, we are going to now replace this with the image. Let me show you. So image, other image, all right? And then let's continue down. This one is the other title. We are going to replace it with the other title we are being passed here. Other name. Let's use the name here. And then this one is for the other title. And then I also wanted to do the rating one. So, but this one I'm going to leave as an exercise. So if you are following along, finish this exercise and make sure the rating is dynamic and come here into the testimonial data and now write the rating out of 5, maybe, but we are not going to focus with halfway ratings like 3.5. We're just going to focus on full number rating. So come here and add a new key and say rating, maybe 4. And then I want you to display, I think this job is done. So I want you to display the rating. Let me just make sure this one can have enough room. So I want to make sure that you can show the rating dynamically. I'm not going to do that here. So let me remove this. Command save. And then, so I want you to populate the dynamic data of the rating. So go ahead and download an empty star, or you can use Google. You can come here and search empty star SVG. Download that empty. You can see it. We have it here in the SVG repo. Okay. So search that in the browser and then download it. And then now inside the finished version, make sure you add this dynamically. But now we are not going to focus on that. Let's finish up. So as I said, the work of the populate data is to populate the card we cut with dynamic data. And then we can close this function. And then now let's continue. What you might notice, the testimonials are gone. How are they gone? We don't have initial data. So what I'm going to do now again, I'm going to create an init function. All right. So I'm going to create an init. Let me create here. So function init. What is the work of this function? The work of this function is to initialize the initial testimonial. So inside our testimonial data, you can see that there is a testimonial that is active. This is the testimonial you are going to populate initially to the DOM. All right, so let's do this. So what I'm going to do is to grab that testimonial. So we can say const initial is equals to testimonials dot find, and then on each testimonial, find a testimonial dot is active. So we know there is one of them that is active, so we don't care about whether it will not work. And then we call the populate data function. We remember the populate data function, the populate data function whose job is to return a card with dynamic data that was passed as arguments, other name, content. It returns just the HTML card. All right. So we call the populate data and then give it initial dot. We start with the content. Then you can see the next is the other image. So we can say initial dot other image. We can see here we are moving to the other image. And then next we go to the initial dot other name. Then the title, initial dot other title. This one will populate and return us HTML. We need to now swap the data inside the slot with the new HTML we have already formulated. So let's grab this. So we can say here, we can say const slot is equals to document dot query selector. Then we grab the dot slot. You can see time is very much gone. Let's finish up. So we get the slot. We are going to swap the data inside the slot with the data we have already formulated. So we can say now slot dot inner HTML. Now you can see we formulated the inner HTML. Then we set it to the new data. And then after doing that, you can see the testimonials are still not showing because we have not called this function. So let me show you a cool trick. It's called an immediately invoked function. This is a function that is immediately invoked after calling. So you wrap your function inside parentheses and then call it. And then now you can see our new testimonial has shown. So the image is not showing. So let's see why the image is not working. So the source here, 1.jpg. So the image is there, but it is not showing. So let's see why. All right. So we have the image src. So the src should be the other image. So did we pass the other image? Initial.other image. And that other image is something like this. Now I changed the name. So let's change this name to imgs. So I had a wrong file name, folder name. And then you can see this one is being loaded by JavaScript because we are loading it in the initial. So if I don't call this function, we're not going to see the testimonial. So if I call this function, you can see now it is loading us the new data. So our job now, whenever these buttons are clicked, is to swap the data. So let's do that very, very much quick because of time. So we have already capturing the click events. So what I'm going to do now inside here, I'm going to work through this very fast. So if you think about the thought process is that first thing first, we need to know the current index of the testimony that is being shown. So we can say current index. So current index is equals to testimonials dot find index. We want to get the index of the current item. So item, then you can say item dot is active. We want to get the index of the currently active item. We saw the items have active, true, active, false. So we are getting the index of the item that is active. That's the first step. The next thing we need to do now is we get the array length. So we can say array length is equals to testimonials dot length. So we need to get the length of that array. And the reason we need the array length is because we are going to the next testimonial, going back to the next testimonial, we need that. So we are dealing with array length like that. So we get the array length, and then now we need now to determine the next new index. So we can create a variable with the let and then call it let new index. So we are trying to formulate the new index. So we already have the type. So if the type is left, we have two types, left or right. So if the type is equals to left, this one means this person wants to go to the previous testimonial. The first thing we check if the current index of the item is equals to 0. So what do you think we should do if the current item is 0? We are going back to the last element. All right. So how can we get the index of the last element? So we can set the new index to be equals to array length minus 1. So if our array index length is, if the current item is the first item and this person has pressed the previous button, so we set the new index to the last element. How do we get the last element? We get the length and then we subtract by 1, because the length does not start, the length is not 0 indexed, but the indices are 0 based indexed. So the length of this is 0, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the length. The length is 4. But the indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3. So to get the last element is the length minus 1. That's what we have done here. And then else, that means this is not the current element. So we can just subtract 1 from the current index. So we can say new index is equals to current index minus 1. Then let's do it for the next item. So let's say else. Else means that this person is moving forward, and the only scenario we need to capture is whenever they are in the last element, so that we can set it back to the initial index. So we can say if current index is equals to array length minus 1. So this means that we have reached at the end of the array. We need to reset the current index. So we can say new index, and then we set it to 0. Otherwise, else we just set the new index is equals to current index plus 1, right? And then after doing that, we will get the new index. So, and then if we get the new index, we are not yet done. We have the new index yet. So what we need to do now is to reset the isActive attribute. You can see now the isActive should now point to the new index item, and then the existing index item should be removed, the isActive attribute. So I'm going to use a for each. So I'm going to say testimonials dot for each testimonial. So for each item and its index, I'm going to use IDX for the index. So for each item and its index, we first check if the index is equals to the new index. So if the index matches the new index, that means this is the now current active item. So we change its active property to true. Else, now inside the else, some of them now are false, some are there's one that is true. So we can call another check and see if it's active. Then that's when we change the item.isActive is equals to false. So if you don't use this if, then it will still rechange items that are still false, right? And then with that, we have now fixed the isActive to reflect the new index. And then now finally, we now need to get the new item. So const new item is equals to, we have its index. We wrote the new index here. Since we have its index, we can just call the testimonials and then the new index. So that will give us the new item. And then now we call the slot dot inner HTML is equals to, we populate now the new data of the current new item. And then we can say now new item dot content. We pass all the data. You can see the next data is the other image. So we can say new item dot other image. The next one is other name. You can see them lighting up here. So we can say new item dot other name. Then finally we pass the other title. So we can say new item dot other title. And that's it, guys. So let's see whether this one worked. You can see now this one is working as we expect. So that's it, guys. That's how we create a testimonial carousel. We have so many ways of creating testimonial carousel. We could be creating new cards and then changing the new classes. We have other methods. We can look into those, but this is the simplest we have seen, and it is very nice. We can now add animations, or maybe we can use now like the one that swipes away and then a new one shows up. So that's it, guys. That's how you create a testimonial card. We have so many ways of creating it, but I'm glad I showed you this method. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like and repost, and you can follow for more. Thank you.